Hello everyone, welcome back to the question answer discussion session. So today's question is from the anatomy physiology section, and the question is blepharitis is the inflammation of A choice bone marrow, B choice bile duct, C choice urinary bladder, D choice glans penis, E choice eyelid. So before coming to the correct answer, let's have a detailed discussion on the inflammation of various organs and the terminologies used for such inflammations. So coming to the first one, the inflammation of brain is called as encephalitis. So encephalitis means inflammation of brain. Now what is the inflammation of spinal cord called as? It is myelitis. So inflammation of spinal cord is called as myelitis, whereas the inflammation of brain is called as encephalomyelitis. Now what is the inflammation of both this brain and spinal cord? Yes, it is encephalomyelitis. Encephalomyelitis is the inflammation of both brain and spinal cord. Now coming to the fourth one, inflammation of meninges is called as meningitis. Now coming to the inflammation of nerve, it is neuritis. Inflammation of bone is called as osteitis. Inflammation of joint is called as arthritis. So inflammation of bone is called as osteitis and inflammation of joint is called as arthritis. Now what is the inflammation of both bone and joint? Yes, it is osteoarthritis. Now coming to the next inflammation, inflammation of bone marrow is called as osteomyelitis. Inflammation of bone marrow is called as osteomyelitis. Inflammation of tendon is called as tendinitis. Inflammation of vertebrae is called as spondylitis. Inflammation of hip joint is called as coccytis. So coccytis is the inflammation of hip joint. Inflammation of eye is called as ophthalmitis. Whereas the inflammation of eyelids are called as blepharitis. Inflammation of cornea is called as keratitis. Whereas the inflammation of uvea is called as uveitis. Now coming to the next inflammation of retina is called as retinitis. Whereas the inflammation of conjunctiva is called as conjunctivitis. Now coming to the inflammation of lacrimal gland, the gland which produces tears, the inflammation of lacrimal gland is called as dacryoadenitis. Dacryoadenitis. So dacryoadenitis is the inflammation of lacrimal gland. You can remember this letter cry. When you cry, tears will come from the lacrimal gland. So the inflammation of lacrimal gland is called as dacryoadenitis. Now coming to the inflammation of adipose tissue is called as steatitis. Inflammation of adipose tissue is called as steatitis, whereas inflammation of dermis and epidermis is called as dermatitis. Now coming to the inflammation of subcutaneous tissue is called as cellulitis. Cellulitis is the inflammation of subcutaneous tissue. Now coming to the inflammation of mouth and oral cavity, both are called as stomatitis. Remember, stomatitis is not the inflammation of stomach. Inflammation of stomach is called as gastritis, whereas the inflammation of mouth and oral cavity is called as stomatitis. Now coming to the next inflammation of teeth is called as odontitis. Inflammation of gum is called as gingivitis. Inflammation of lips are called as cheilitis. So cheilitis is the inflammation of lips, whereas inflammation of tongue is called as glossitis. So glossitis is the inflammation of tongue, whereas inflammation of pharynx is called as pharyngitis. Now inflammation of tonsil is called as tonsillitis. Inflammation of intestine is called as enteritis. Inflammation of colon is called as colitis. Now coming to the inflammation of rectum is called as proctitis. Proctitis is the inflammation of rectum, and the inflammation of anus is called as anitis. Now liver, inflammation of liver is hepatitis, whereas inflammation of gallbladder is called as cholecystitis. Now coming to the inflammation of bile duct is called as cholangitis. So cholecystitis is the inflammation of gallbladder and cholangitis is the inflammation of bile duct. Coming to the inflammation of pancreas, yes, pancreatitis. Now inflammation of kidney is nephritis, whereas inflammation of pelvis is called as pyelitis. So inflammation of kidney is called as nephritis and inflammation of pelvis is called as pyelitis. Now coming to the next inflammation, if the inflammation of kidney and pelvis happens together, it is called as pyelonephritis. We already told inflammation of pelvis is called as pyelitis and inflammation of kidney is called as nephritis. So inflammation of kidney and pelvis it is together called as pyelonephritis. Now coming to the inflammation of urinary bladder, it is cystitis. Inflammation of gallbladder was called as cholecystitis, whereas inflammation of urinary bladder is called as cystitis. Now inflammation of ureter, urethritis. Urethra, it is urethritis. Now the inflammation of nose and nasal cavity is rhinitis. Inflammation of sinus, sinusitis. Inflammation of larynx, laryngitis. Inflammation of bronchus, bronchitis. Now coming to the next inflammation, inflammation of uterus is called as metritis. Metritis is the inflammation of uterus. Now if the inflammation happens in the inner lining of uterus or in the endometrium, it is endometritis. It is called as endometritis. Inflammation of vagina is called as vaginitis. Now coming to the inflammation of mammary gland, it is called as mastitis. Whereas the inflammation of nipples, they are called as stylitis. So stylitis is the inflammation of nipples. Now coming to the inflammation of testis, it is called as orchitis. Whereas the inflammation of glans penis is called as balanitis. So balanitis is the inflammation of glans penis, orchitis is the inflammation of testis, stylitis is the inflammation of nipples. Now myocardium, yes, it is myocarditis. Now coming to the inflammation of vein, it is inflammation of vein is called as phlebitis. Phlebitis is the inflammation of vein, whereas inflammation of artery is arteritis. Now, coming to the inflammation of umbilical cord, it is called as omphalitis. Inflammation of umbilical cord is called as omphalitis. So we have told that inflammation of vein is called as phlebitis and inflammation of umbilical cord is called as omphalitis. Therefore, inflammation of umbilical vein is called as omphalophlebitis. Omphalophlebitis. Whereas the inflammation of umbilical artery is called as omphaloarteritis. So these are some of the very important inflammations and the terminologies used for the inflammation of various organs and tissues. Now coming back to your question, blepharitis is the inflammation of E-choice eyelid. So inflammation of eyelid is called as blepharitis. So the correct answer is E-choice. Thank you.